not trying to be mean, and we're not trying to harass anybody, we promise. It's just trying to get everybody into a different way of thinking.
So, one word. You don't need to raise your hand, you can just spit it out. Ready?
Yeah.
Power.
Control.
Government.
Politics.
Freedom.
Alright. Does anybody want to throw out a definition of what power is to them?
Okay, I believe power is something that you hold over another person, something that's higher than another person or thing.
Okay, everybody kind of agree with that, or does somebody have something different? Destiny?
I think power also has to do a lot with relationships between people. It's not necessarily one having it over another, but it exists between two people in some way.
Power refers broadly to any ability to effectively change or exert control over either things or people, subjects, or objects. So, like you said, any variable. So, is everybody cool with where that definition stands? We understand it's not perfect. None of these definitions are perfect.
So, how does power act on you? How is power present in your life?
I hold power with secrets. A lot of people tell me secrets. I have the power to go off and tell absolutely everyone. But I don't. But if someone tells a secret about me and they ask me to keep their secret, I'll usually go and tell one person their secret because they did it to me.
Power is generally something that you give. Like, even if someone feels like they've taken the power from you, on some level you said, okay, they have the power, so you allow them to have it, when you could stand up.
So how do people get power?
People tend to gravitate to people who are a little bit more extroverted and who seem to know what they're talking about, or do know what they're talking about, either or.
Let's try to break it down to a more shallow level, because you're right. People do flock to certain kinds of people, and that's kind of on a deeper level, but on a very shallow level, who has power? Like, what kinds of people, what types of people have power?
Aggressive people, pretty people.
Majority.
People who fit into society the way it's looked upon by everybody else, like magazines.
Why do these people have power?
People with money.
What? I'm sorry, Jordan.
Or sometimes they're born with it.
Do you
Like,
wanna,
you might have a really rich parents.
So
they're born with advantages.
Sometimes being born into it doesn't necessarily mean either that you have power, because it's like whether or not you accept that you have power.
does somebody want to explain to me what a system of oppression is and how we usually identify that?
And before we do that, does somebody want to clarify what oppression means? What is oppression?
Being held down.
Right. Exactly. Being held down. So what does a system of oppression imply?
It's a system used to oppress others, like a group normally. So it's sort of like its creator owns like a maze. It's very difficult to break out of a system of oppression.
How do you recognize a system of oppression? I keep saying that. They usually end in 3 letters. There's 3 letters that they all end with. The ism. We're going to be talking about what are called the main 3 a lot of times in systems of oppression. It's debatable whether these are actually the 3 main ones, but it's pretty commonly accepted that they are, because all the others can fall in under them. And that's capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy. White supremacy is the odd one out. It is not one of the isms. All of the isms that go with that, like racism and colorism, fall in under it. Patriarchy is the same. It falls in sexism and genderism.
A lot of people recognize, capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy as these giant systems, but they don't really, know where certain things fit in. And so we have this amazing and awesome graph, or diagram. It just gives you examples of what the isms are, where they fall, and maybe raises some in your mind that you didn't consider to be systems of oppression before.
White supremacy, that is the newest of the 3, that is the most contemporary of the 3, and that works to maintain the privilege and power of the people, history, and culture of Europe, mainly Western Europe.
What is xenophobia?
It like literally means like fear of the other, like that which is not you.
I'd also like to point out how the word foreign is xenophobic in a way, because it's saying that they're like other or very, very different. So they're human.
It's kind of dehumanizing.
If I can digress right here, this is one of my favorite topics. It's that how Gabe was saying with xenophobia being a word that we use, but it's also foreign being a word that we use all the time, but it's also sort of xenophobic. Language is power's favorite weapon. Colloquialisms, words that we don't think are hurtful, and that people who might, if people are getting oppressed by words, they might not get it. They might not be like, that word makes me less of a human than whoever is using that word. They don't get it because it's so subversive that we don't even notice, and it's completely acceptable. The first way to change how you feel, how you're being oppressed, if you're being oppressed, is to manipulate the language. Because before you can have social change, you need to be able to talk about social change. And that's where language comes in.
How do we get in it, I guess, is the first question. How do we end up in these cycles?
The first cycle, it's called socialization, and that's when you get indoctrinated. I've always referred to it as knowing your place. Whenever somebody tells me to know my place, I get really angry because I equate it with psychosocialization. But it's basically where you learn, where you fit in the cycles of oppression. What power you have, what power you don't have, where you can go, where you can't go.
We learn as kids, and it's reinforced until we die. Does anybody remember a distinct moment where they experienced their parents telling them, trying to reinforce some social norms?
I asked my mom if we could go to Kirby Lane, and she said, would we fit in at Kirby Lane? She had so much anxiety that people would look at us like, what are those Mexicans doing eating in our white restaurant?
I remember playing with my cousin's dollhouse, and then like my parents being like, "We're not gonna stop you, but like you know that's a girl thing,
I
right?"
remember my grandmother saying that I should consciously try to lower my voice while I was talking, so people would be aware of my gender.
The hard part is getting out of it. The first step is you have to wake up. You have to become aware of it, and even if you don't feel like you in particular have been oppressed or are oppressing anybody, it's being aware of the plight of others.
Who's ever done something by accident, maybe on purpose, when they were younger or now, to socialize someone else? Part of the cycle is that we also socialize other people. Even if we don't say so, sometimes there are things that we think about people as they walk by.
When I was like 6th, 7th grade, I was really like freaked out about like what everybody thought. And then like 8th grade, I kind of started like breaking out of my shell, and I'm like, I can do whatever the hell I want to. And it was this really great realization for me.
Then the last steps are building community, coming together is part of that. And then from then it's maintaining your community, and your community will keep on growing, and from that community you will get change. If you leave out those last 3 steps, creating a community and maintaining a community, your cycle of liberation can sort of turn back into a cycle of socialization. And it's a good conversation to have, but I have a question for y'all. What's racism?
Prejudice and power.
Okay.
It's a prejudice against somebody's color, skin, or race, or culture.
Okay. Somebody else?
Seeing them as not equal.
Okay.
Who is them?
Oh, whatever race is being discriminated against.
I'll give you the definition of racism, and it's one of the most controversial. Okay. Racism is the system that gives white people privilege in everyday life at the expense of people of color. What do people think about that definition?
It's really
Yeah,
one-sided.
like my problem with it is that like, yes, in this society, it is like white people are majority, like power, money, majority, and I think when you put in very specific terms like that, it skews it.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody agree for a different reason?
The idea of racism did kind of start in our culture with white people.
I am a big fan of this definition. I think it's perfect.
I think I would expand my definition, and I think it more aligns with yours if I add privilege. So I was saying racism would be privilege plus prejudice plus power.